Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at the rather special and rather cheap and rather effective IDCooling SE214XT. Basically, it's a 20 quid cooler. Can't go wrong. Keep watching to find out. Okay, so in today's video we're taking a look at the cheapo cooler, which is the SE214XT from IDCooling. This has actually been purchased by us out of our own funds, and I figured I'd do a review on it. Loads of people have been suggesting this, and there are tons of different versions of it. We actually had a very similar version of this sent to us from one of our viewers, so thank you very much for that. But I thought I'd go for the whole retail experience and see what the deal is. This is a £20 cooler, as I've already mentioned. It will fit Intel 11.5X sockets, LGA 1200 and LGA 1700, and is also suitable for AM4. Unfortunately not AM5, although I think realistically a £20 cooler for an AM5 is probably pushing things a little bit anyway. Having said that, we do have 4 6mm heat pipes on this thing, a 120mm addressable RGB fan, which is actually an extremely quiet version with a RPM between 500 and 1500 RPM, and all of it in a rather nice package with a little bit of an accent on the top. So if you're into your pretty looking coolers, then this might be just the thing for you. So obviously in today's video we're going to go through, do an unboxing, see what we'll get, show you how to install it on an AM4 platform. We're going to do some temperature tests as well with a Ryzen 9 3900 and see how it fares. And then we'll come back at the very end of the video with our final thoughts and our recommendations. So with that said, let's get straight into it. So from the packaging, as we can see, so it's actually a pretty small cooler, comes in small packaging, IDCooling SE214XT ARGB. Loads of different versions of this on the market. There's black version, silver version, non-RGB, RGB, etc, etc. At the moment though, this one seems to come out on top. There's also a white version with a white fan, so if you've got a white setup and you want to go with that, then you certainly can do. At the top there, it talks about some of the addressable RGB functionality and what brands it will basically work with. Essentially, if you've got a 3-pin 5V addressable RGB header, you're good to go. On the back goes through the technical specifications, so I'll put those on the screen so you can see. One of the more important ones is going to be the size, I'm guessing, for a lot of you. This is actually quite a diminutive cooler with a maximum height of 150mm. So it should fit into most micro ATX and ATX cases very easily. Obviously, ITX chassis you may need to check a little bit closer. Most cases will take about 155 to 160mm tower coolers, so yeah, this should have a very good and very wide gamut of what cases it will actually fit into. So when taken out of the box, this is exactly what you get. There's a little bit of extra cardboard, but I've taken it out because it's not particularly interesting. So obviously you get the tower cooler itself, which is very cool. We'll take a look at that shortly in more detail. You get an installation guide, which comes in multi-language. This one, bizarrely, comes in English, and I'm not too sure what language that is, possibly Russian on the back. I'm not really someone who speaks or writes in Russian, so no idea. Let us know in the comment section what language that actually is. Obviously, you're going to need a fan and a addressable RGB and all that kind of stuff. So this is IDCooling's fan. They have cut costs wherever possible, it does appear, with this particular design. And I think that's what IDCooling do anyway. They're one of those companies which give you kind of value for money. So if you don't need something, there's pointless putting it in. So on the fan, a typical sign of that is rubber pads. So the rubber pads are actually only on the back face. There are none installed on the front face, which for the amount of money that it's going to save is kind of a little bit pointless, I think, personally, but maybe for the way it's manufactured or whatever, maybe it cuts out a particular process, I don't know. Other than that, the fan itself, very nice. So you've got nice translucent blades on there. You have got a hydrodynamic bearing in there, which is always nice to see. RPMs, as we said earlier, between 500 and 1500 RPMs, and with a really, really low rating actually on the noise floor. So somewhere between 13 decibels, which is basically inaudible to the human ear realistically, up to a maximum of somewhere in the 30s, low 30s. So that is a very good sign. In terms of connectivity, again, a little bit limited. They have cut down things where absolutely necessary. So we have a single PWM connection and a single 3-pin 5V addressable RGB header. No elaborate splitters or pass-throughs or pigtails, anything like that. Literally just a straight cable straight in, which again, it does cut down on some of the costs, I guess, but potentially if you have got limited amounts of ports and you're looking to daisy chain these things, well then you're totally out of luck. Also included, obviously, all the bracketry and components you'll need to actually install the cooler. There are only 2 spring clips included in the pack, so if you do want to set up a push-pull configuration, again, not going to happen. You will need to buy some more spring clips, or just do something old school, like with some cable ties or something like that. You also get a backplate, which is for your Intel setup. So this is going to do your LJ5X, LJ1200, and LJ1700. And this is done, they've done a good job actually. You can't install it wrong because it works whichever way round. And in order to get the lugs right, it basically just slides, so you don't have to lock them into position, which can be beneficial in some ways and a bit of a pain in others, depending on your dexterity, but certainly yeah, seems to be absolutely fine. It will do the job it needs to do. Also with that, you do have a top bracket. So this is the top mounting, so this goes over the top of either your Intel or your AMD bracketry, and just screws down onto the top, and then your CPU will actually screw onto those bits there. So that's absolutely fine. That is using these 2 screws, which are spring loaded. They just go down through the bottom of the cooler. We'll go through this in the installation, which we'll have a little bit later in the video. There's also a little sachet of unbranded thermal paste, no idea what that is. And you have 2 bags of fittings, so one of which is marked up for your LGA 1700. So this is basically all of your Intel stuff. And on the other side, we've got the AMD one. So the AMD one has the rounded spacers, whereas the LJ 1700 has the fluted spacers on there. So yeah, it's pretty easy to work out. The AMD ones also have chrome screws, whereas the LGA or Intel ones have black screws. So yeah, nice and easy to work out which is which. So now we can take a look at the cooler itself, and it's actually a very tiny little thing. Very small, like I said, 150 millimeters in total height, and that does include the extra cap, which is on the top. So you've got a plastic cap on the top, which covers up the top of the heat pipes, which is a nice little effect. And also you've got a sort of like a brushed metal or brushed aluminum type effect on the top, which is yeah, kind of cool, even though it is on plastic. They've done a particularly good job with that. If you want to take it off, there's just a couple of screws, you can remove that and just have it completely exposed should you wish to. Something which I'm not particularly keen on is the actual fin stack is a little bit on the flexy side, and if you accidentally catch one, they do bend quite easily. As you can see from the diminutive packaging, which we discussed a little bit earlier, this one actually did come in the post relatively damaged. So we had some bent fins on this side, and there was quite a lot of damage in this middle section, which I have tried to crudely straighten out using some pliers. It's not done a horrible job, and obviously it is going to be visible to some extent. There is a bit of a shame that this isn't a symmetrical cooler. So as you can see, the pipes themselves actually do swoop down and around. So this is actually a good thing in some respects. Obviously in our instance it isn't, because that means that this is going to be the front side and the back side is going to be exposed to some extent. So we are going to see that damage there, which is a little unfortunate. But it does mean that you can actually offset it a little bit. So RAM clearance is going to be excellent, because obviously the pipes are going to swoop back a little bit. So your fan's going to be further back than it would be normally. So your RAM clearance down the side is going to be absolutely excellent. The pipes themselves, 6mm, like I said. So 4 of those, they are semi-exposed on the bottom. So you've got the exposed, you can see the copper there where they haven't bothered, obviously, coating it with nickel on the bottom, because it's pointless. You want as much contact as possible. And it's actually been finished quite nicely. Running my thumbnail down there, or what's left of my thumbnail. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not getting caught or anything, so there's no real jagged edges. There possibly is microscopic bumps in there, but as far as I can tell, it does appear to be quite flat, which is good. You also got a relatively large cold plate at the bottom here, which has been extended slightly. And also a nice thing, which I do often like to see, is the fact they've actually put some extra fins into that as well, just to give a little bit more surface area. I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. Having a bulk of metal at this particular point is good for absorbing the heat clearly. Yeah, whether or not the intricacies of the extra fins make much difference, I honestly couldn't tell you, but certainly it adds a little bit to the design. Other than that, yes, pretty decent, pretty lightweight, somewhere in the region of about 800 grams for the entire thing, so it's not a heavyweight cooler, which again, if you're building this into flip systems, if you're going to be posting this, then you're not going to be putting too much strain on the sockets, which is always a good thing for computers that are in transit, that sort of stuff, although the heatsink might take a little bit of damage. Anyway, I think that's pretty much wrapped up what this is all about. Best thing for us to do now is to get in and install it on our AM4 platform. Okay, so now we're going to install the SE214XT CPU cooler. onto our AM4 platform. So this is a X570 Tough Gaming from ASUS, and also there is a Ryzen 9 3900 in here for testing purposes. The rest of it, RAM, etc., is not really relevant to this, but we will be going through doing testing a little bit later on. But first of all, let's get this cooler installed. So in order to prep this, we're going to first of all need to remove the standard 2 retaining brackets that come included with AM4 motherboards. We'll keep those to one side for later on use, or possibly for RMAs. So now what we're going to need to do is to put over the plastic spacers. And there are also 4 screws as well, so these are the silver screws. So plastic spacers over the top of each one of the mounting holes. Then on top of that we've got our bracket, AM4 bracket. So this just goes down on top like so, and then put the screws down through. And I would get them a few turns done on each side. Because this doesn't really lock in as such, you might want to get them get the threads started a little bit before you tighten them fully down. I personally don't like this design. I think if you're trying to do this with the PC being upright, which some people may have to, it's going to be quite a tricky process. So I'm going to do that one up now and do them kind of opposing corners, making sure it's fully tightened. Give it a wiggle, make sure that it's not going to move. So now you can install or apply some thermal paste. Normally at this point we would use the manufacturer's own paste, but for testing purposes I'm going to be using some MX4 and then going to spread it out across the processor. Now we can put the processor on top. So in order to do that, first of all, remove your bit of sticky tape, because that will not help thermal issues, and make sure you take notice of the swoop of the pipes. So you'll be wanting it so that the fan is this way round, so the pipes are swooping backwards towards the back of the computer. And all you need to do is just gently put it over the top there, and you'll see the pins come through at the bottom. Next, you've got 2 screws with springs, so just plop those on the top. You can do a couple of turns by hand if you wish to, just to get it started. I'm going to do the same on the back as well. A couple of screws to get it started, and then we just turn it around, and then you can just do alternate sides just to give it even mounting pressure. So do about 4 turns, 5 turns, something along those lines. Doesn't have to be exact. And that's stopped that one now, so we can make sure, do a few more turns there, and there we go, that has locked into place. So that's it, we're good there. Now we need to install the fan. To install the fan, relatively straightforward to do, so make sure that your 2 cables are going to be coming out from the bottom, and grab one of your spring clips, and it goes into the bottom rather than the top or front. And they don't hold in very well. And then line up your fan, and then all you need to do is just stretch the clip behind, and it locks into place there. You can, if you want to, then sort of straighten up a bit, make sure that it's fully adjusted. And then we're going to switch around to the other side, and whilst holding the fan in place, because otherwise it's going to have a tendency to try and pull away, so hook in your bracket or clip, and then just push it so that both of these bars are lined up. And that is pretty much it for the installation. It's relatively straightforward as long as you've got a nice open area to do it in. The last thing you'd want to do is to hook up your two connections. So that's going to be your PWM and your addressable RGB. On this particular board, the addressable RGB is up here at the top. So that's going to be nice and easy. So literally just a standard 3-pin 5-volt connection. So just going to pop that on there. That's very easy to do. Obviously you can cable manage it out the way however you see fit. And the last one is going to be the fan, and that goes into the fan header up here. There's two to choose from. So I was going to go for this one here. That can be managed out the way should it be necessary in your particular case. But that is effectively it. Make sure that the fan blades spin and isn't being obstructed by anything. You can, if you want to, give it a little wiggle and just make sure that it is all perfectly lined up. As you can possibly just about see here, mine is slightly out of alignment there, so it's a little bit lower on this side than this side. So if you do want to adjust it, all you need to do, just unclip it a little bit and just move it around slightly, put the clip back in, and I think that is much better. So I'm going to get on now and do some testing on this, see what the temperatures are like. If you're watching the full review, then you'll see that next. If you're just watching the installation, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Okay, so by the magic of video editing technology, I've done all the testing. It's been a few hours, and it's actually really hot in here today. We've got the wood burner going, so the temperatures, there is going to be a significant delta. The room temperature at the moment is about 26.5 degrees Celsius, which for the middle of November 2022 is, yeah, a little bit on the warm side, but anyway, it's drying the clothes, what can I say? Also, what is drying the clothes and also keeping them cool is the SE214XT ARGB, and as you can see, it is all lit up now. This is on our test platform, and I've got to be honest with you, it's very boring, but it's very good. Trying to actually make this review in some way interesting is very hard to do, because there's nothing here which is kind of, wow, exceptional. It's just great value for money. Now you might find that an exceptional thing, I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments section. I have actually had a quick look on Amazon to see what the kind of price history has been on this one. And I know earlier in the video I said that the price does fluctuate, but actually I'm completely wrong. IDCooling EU, which is covering the European Union and England, they've been selling this on Amazon.co.uk since May of this year, 2022, so basically 7 months, 6-7 months, for exactly the same price. Well, £19.99 or £20 exactly. So it appears this is going to be the price it's going to stay at, I would hope. Potentially we might even see a drop come Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those types of things, maybe slightly after, if you're watching this video into 2023 and beyond. It'd be interesting to see how the prices pan out. Ultimately, I'm guessing it's kind of one of those coolers which is slightly at the end of its lifespan. And by that I mean, obviously, LGA 1700 will evidently be LGA 1800 at some point in the near future. So we've probably got maybe one more CPU cycle coming out of Intel before they change boards again, in which case there may be a new socket which this may not fit. Currently this works with AM4 but not AM5. It is not AM5 compatible. So yeah, the kind of lifespan of this is slightly limited, in the same respect as a lot of coolers on the market are also. So it's not in a unique position as such, but it is something that I'm imagining that companies such as IDCooling, etc., are considering in the back of their minds, that there is a new socket out for AM5, etc., etc. Anyway, with that said, it looks great. I'll be honest with you, the addressable RGB, the LEDs, very, very smooth. The transitions are all very nice. And from what they say on the box, down to the 500 RPM, 1500 RPM at the top, it being very quiet, I can only agree. It is exceptionally quiet. Even under full load at 1500 RPM, it is pretty much still whisper quiet. You do hear a little bit of wind going through there, but not a great deal. And to be honest with you, compared with my GT 1030, my trusty test card, that is easily a lot louder. The fan on that isn't particularly good, but not to take anything away from IDCooling, they've done a fantastic job. And even at the lower RPMs, it still does compete quite well. And it's actually quite interesting. I am considering doing a follow-up video with this particular cooler with maybe some higher performance fans. such as maybe some of Arctic's P12s, which go up to 2000 RPM, just to see if we can squeeze a little bit more performance out of this platform. That would be an interesting thing to see, I think. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments section and we'll try and make that happen at a later date. But overall, yes, it works very well, it's very cost effective, and I should go through and share with you some of my results. So first of all, I've got my notes here so I'm getting it all correct, because literally I've only just done it and my brain is completely frazzled. So first of all, we got the CPU Z stress test, something easy you can do at home. Ryzen 9 3900, drawing 132 watts. So there's two different runs, a single run for both the single core and multi-core, and also a 5-minute soak test. With the single core running as just a quick one-off, we've got 8,264 points, and also for the single core we've got 546.2. When you do the longer soak test, you don't get a single core, only a multi-core, so I'm going to say it's the same for the single thread or single core. When we actually run it for 5 minutes, we drop down to 8,203 points. This is absolutely normal and is expected behavior. If you're seeing any massive drop-offs, like hundreds of points, then there's something going on, either thermal throttling, or there's obviously something going on with the system, possibly even a background task happening. You can never be too sure, but from what I can see here from the test results, this is absolutely fine and totally expected behavior, and actually doing quite well. So next up, we're going to do a similar thing with Cinebench. So again, we're going to do a single run, so that is going to be a multi-core run all the way through, just one loop, and see what the temperature is like. And we're going to do the same with a 5-minute loop, which will give an air cooler enough time to kind of get to an equilibrium and get to its maximum temperature, and to see if it actually can keep the CPU under control. So with the single run, we had a maximum temperature of 72.6 degrees Celsius, and we had a score of 18,256 points. With the 5-minute run, we did manage to get temperatures a little bit higher, but they did actually equalize at 74.4 degrees Celsius, and we did drop a few points on the score down to 18,116. Again, totally expected. The single run generally is always a little bit better than doing a longer run. It depends what I'm doing and how I'm going to measure things. Generally, a single run for me is a pretty decent pointer, and generally when we post scores on our Discord, then it will be from a single run. So again, just to confirm, this is with our CPU Z test results. So on this particular instance, we're looking at lowest recorded temperature and highest recorded temperature. Again, slightly warm room, 26.5 degrees Celsius. So do take that off of your temperatures to give you a delta. So we're looking at a lowest recorded temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, and our maximum temperature was 72.6, and this is under CPU Z. Moving over to Cinebench again, so our lowest recorded temperature at the time when we were doing this, 36.5, so again that's within half a degree of the previous one, so I would call that exactly the same. So when it gets down to its lowest temperature, that is pretty much going to be your baseline on this particular setup, around about 37 degrees Celsius. So if you take into account 26.5 degrees Celsius in the room, so we're about 10 degrees over ambient, which is pretty decent for a kind of idle temperature, I think, personally. When it comes up to the highest recorded temperature, we've got 74.4. So again, for about 41 degrees over the ambient temperature. Again, absolutely fine. And for a £20 cooler, I think it's done particularly well. So there you have it. There's the results. I've got to be honest with you. Again, it's one of those things. For 20 quid, it's crazy not to have one. If you're someone who is maybe building PCs, flipping PCs, doing the kind of the motherboard shuffle now and then when you're trying to sell off some old stuff, having one of these just in stock, ready to use, is awesome. For those of you that aren't in that kind of position and you just want something cheap and cheerful, which is going to cool your PC very easily and actually not be too difficult to install, again, IDCooling SE214XT, it's definitely got to be worth a shout. The only thing, obviously, do think about longevity, no AM5 support, which is arguably not the end of the world. And obviously LGA 1700 is most likely to be the end of the road also for Intel. But I think for £20 you can certainly forgive that. Not quite as good a deal as we had with the Antec A50 cooler, which we reviewed ages ago. More than welcome to check that out. We'll put some links up here or down in the video description. If that one ever comes out again at the same price, then that is going to be one that we all should have bought more of. But yeah, it was one of those snap things which just happened. But I think as an everyday purchase at an everyday price, no special offers, no trickery, no gimmickry, no vouchers, no trade-ins, for 20 quid for this, I don't think you can go too far wrong at all. But what I think isn't important, what you think is. So let us know what you think in the comments section below. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.